project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Well, you've no doubt heard of David Milgaard. Tragically Hip wrote a song about him. His wrongful conviction, his extended imprisonment, his ultimate release, based in large part on the advocacy of his mother. But how much do you know about Allan Sobotiak? We're going to be talking about his case today. In just a moment, we'll check in with two individuals that have fought tirelessly for Mr. Sobotiak's release after more than 35 years in prison for a murder that he has always claimed he didn't commit. We're going to learn a little bit more about the work of Innocence Canada and potentially, how much do we know about how frequently this happens in Canada? Frankly, are there innocent men and women serving decades behind bars for crimes that they quite simply did not commit? That coming up in just a moment. Want to let you know that we're also going to be checking in with political economist John Rapley today. He'll be joining us live from London, England. He's just written a piece in the Globe and Mail arguing that despite the bluster, the United States is actually losing the trade war. Obviously an unsustainable position, and John will argue exactly why in this episode of the show. This is one of those stories, though, leading us in our feature interview today, presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West, a story that'll stop you in your tracks. Allan Sobotiak spent nearly 3.5 decades behind bars for a murder that he always says that he didn't commit. Now the case against him has essentially collapsed. Just a few days ago, the Crown staying the charge of murder, effectively ending the prosecution. But there's a catch. This man was never exonerated. To this point, no apology, no compensation, no formal recognition that a mistake was made. Sobotiak convicted back in 1991 of second-degree murder in the disappearance of Susan Kaminsky. She disappeared, the mother, her body never found, back in 1987. Sobotiak convicted largely on testimony deemed at this point in 2025 to be unreliable. No physical evidence ever tying him to the scene, yet he spent 35 years in prison while organizations like Innocence Canada fought behind the scenes to have this case reopened. Now free, 61 years of age, but in legal limbo. Sobotiak's living, obviously, with the stigma of a murder charge technically still on his record, and a justice system that refuses to admit that it got it wrong. Stéphanie, Nowak, and Pamela Zbarsky join us from Innocence Canada. They're two advocates that have been working tirelessly on this case. Welcome to the program. We appreciate both of your availability. Stéphanie, you're the executive director at Innocence Canada. How did this particular case wind up on your radar?
Yeah, it's a really interesting case because Mr. Sobotiak came to us in a bit of a different way than most of our clients end up at Innocence Canada. He actually wrote his own brief to the Minister of Justice, the Criminal Conviction Review Group, following his parole officer sort of telling him this is something that he should consider doing. And once they passed the first stage of investigation, I believe, they then reached out to Innocence Canada to ask us if we would help Mr. Sobotiak because he was unrepresented. And that's sort of how we ended up with his case. And once we got it, we started digging in there, and we knew that this was something we could not let go of.
Pamela, you're lead counsel at Innocence Canada. Someone with your experience with the law, where do you begin when you take a look at a case like this? I mean, let's be real. There are people who did commit the crimes that they're accused of, that they were arrested, tried, and ultimately convicted of. But this one, different.
Yes. So we approach this case like we do all cases. We review all of the materials. In this case, we were lucky because the CCRG, the minister's delegate, had already collected quite a bit of material after Mr. Sobotiak applied himself. So we were able to review, much of the police file, and we're always looking for our own assessment as to whether or not we believe someone's been wrongly convicted. We spent 6 months reviewing the file in detail. It was a huge team effort with many lawyers reviewing the file. And we found that there were very significant problems in Mr. Sobotiak's case. And in particular, factors in his case, which we commonly see in those that were wrongly convicted. And so after we did our detailed review, discussed the case as an organization, we all agreed that we believed Mr. Sobotiak to be wrongly convicted. And then we started drafting materials to provide to the Minister of Justice in support of Mr. Sobotiak.
So there were obviously contradictory pictures that were painted of this individual. One of them of a violent, sexually deviant offender who could pose a risk to public safety, and the other of a mild-mannered man who was wronged by the justice system. I think probably in the eyes of the public, further complicating this matter was the fact that Sobotiak had allegedly confessed to the crime. He had confessed to not only how it happened and his involvement in it, but what he had done with the body. What's the average person to think of the confession and the bigger picture, that cloud of doubt, so to speak?
No, I mean, that's a very good question, and I would expect the public to be asking those questions. Mr. Sobotiak did provide a confession, and of course, a confession is probably one of the most powerful pieces of evidence against a person, but a confession is important and relevant if it is truthful. And if it's a truthful confession, well, then of course that's strong inculpatory evidence. But there are a lot of reasons that individuals falsely confess. It absolutely happens. There's documented cases of it happening. And in Mr. Sobotiak's case, his confession was very unreliable. It was given to an undercover officer in the context of a police technique, which is known as a Mr. Big investigation. That type of investigation, we have now learned over time and experience, is a very dangerous context in which to give a confession. The Supreme Court has acknowledged that in 2014 when they made these types of confessions presumptively admissible, which means the Crown has to prove sort of a level of reliability. And Mr. Sobotiak was in this Mr. Big investigation where there was a lot of financial inducements held out to him. He was a very poor man on social assistance. He was promised a lot of money, life-changing amounts of money to join this organization. There was the threat of violence. This fictitious organization that the police created was a violent one. He was under immense pressure to confess, and he was also plied with a great deal of amount of alcohol in his sort of final meeting with Mr. Big, which is sort of the lead undercover police officer. So all of the circumstances of Mr. Sobotiak's confession led us to believe that there was a very, very significant danger that his confession was false, that it was unreliable. That's the submissions we made to the Minister of Justice. And essentially, that was really the only evidence against Mr. Sobotiak. I mean, but for this confession, the Crown would not have had a case. So I think by the fact that the Minister of Justice overturned the conviction, they must have found that the confession was unreliable.
So, Stephanie, your team is working on this, led by Pamela, and obviously Innocence Canada reaches a point where you determine that this is a case you'll take on, that this is something you'll apply your resources and your advocacy to. My understanding is that Mr. Sobotiak himself, correct me if I'm wrong, but he had written a plea to the parole board, hundreds of pages long. The successive appeals had been ignored for quite some time. What does Innocence Canada do differently, or what is your team able to do that maybe appointed representatives or Mr. Sobotiak himself was unable to accomplish?
Well, I think that what you have to remember is that in the cases of wrongly convicted people, when they apply to the Minister of Justice, it's actually a very challenging process. And they have to provide something that's called new and significant information. And this has to be information that was not presented at trial and could point to their innocence. And as somebody, a lay person who is in prison, who is representing themselves, to be able to do something like that is I mean, I would say almost impossible to do. So the fact that Mr. Sobotiak was able to get to this point is absolutely remarkable. And so what Innocence Canada does is, as a nonprofit organization, we work with, pro bono lawyers, and we do our best to reinvestigate the case. So as Pamela said, we have the means to look through all of the materials, to hire private investigators and experts. Thanks to donations from the Canadian public, we can continue to do this work. And through that reinvestigation, we can then use our legal minds to create an application for the Minister of Justice that really encompasses all of these new matters of significance that they should be considering in this case. So, Mr. Sobotiak is really quite an impressive person for having been able to get as far as he did, because most wrongly convicted individuals cannot do it, and they absolutely need organizations like Innocence Canada to help them out.
Yeah, I should note by the time of his release, Mr. Sobotiak had spent more years in prison than any other victim of a wrongful conviction in Canadian history. As your team at Innocence Canada characterizes it, a dubious honor. Pamela, what's your assessment? It may be a difficult question to answer, but how often does this happen? I'm sure that there are many people in Canada that claim their innocence that are currently doing time. But what's the reality?
I mean, it's really impossible to say. Our organization is looking at homicide cases only, and the reason we do that is really just resources. I mean, those are the individuals that get sentences of life in prison. We have there's so many more. I mean, most people plead guilty. There's lots of research around false guilty pleas and reasons why individuals would falsely plead guilty to crimes they didn't commit. Those cases almost never come to our organization. There's so many cases, there's so many individuals in custody. We're reviewing right now over 120 different cases. If you look at the cases on our wait list and the cases on our active list, I mean, if you just say that 1% of the people in federal population are innocent, which is, sort of a guesstimate that some academics will lean on, that's still hundreds of individuals. I mean, truly, there is no way to know. We just try to review all the cases we can and just search for those that we believe are wrongly convicted and try to uncover those convictions. But it's really difficult to know. But one thing I am confident in saying is that there are many people in custody right now who are innocent. We know that. We keep finding them. We would love to be put out of business and not have any more innocent people be incarcerated, but we know that they're there, and we're just trying to find as many people as we can.
We're talking right now to Stéphanie Nowak and Pamela Zbarsky from Innocence Canada. We're taking a look here at our live chat powered by Park Power. Erica is watching us. Erica, thanks for your YouTube channel membership. She says, I'd like to think that wrongful convictions don't happen nearly as often now that forensic technology is so much more advanced. Pamela, we want to make sure that we're not forgetting Susan Kaminsky in this. She's the mother of two who disappeared from Edmonton in 1987. Her body never recovered. Are you able to give us an assessment of the forensic capabilities of investigators at that time as compared to now? Obviously drastically different. And while there was no physical evidence tying Mr. Sobotiak to the crime scene or at least to the murder, was there any forensic evidence that surfaced or that your organization was able to present that casted doubt on that original conviction?
So I 2 points, I guess, in relation to that comment. I mean, first of all, I would say that it is true, of course, that forensics have advanced, greatly over time, in particular DNA, of course. And we've made great strides there. And DNA can certainly exonerate someone if it exists. There's lots of cases where DNA, unfortunately, does not exist. So it's not there to be tested, or it doesn't necessarily prove something. If there's DNA, in a home, for example, it may or may not be related to a crime scene that takes place in that home. So certainly advances have been helpful. There's also been forensic evidence that we now know to be junk science, that we used to rely on in the past, that we now know is completely without scientific basis. And there's types of forensic evidence that was used to wrongly convict people that we now know has no basis in science. And then just with respect to this case, there was DNA that was tested in various items. All of it, Mr. Sobotiak was excluded from, so he was not the donor on any of the pieces of the DNA that was tested. And even post his ministerial review, there was further testing that was done. And all of that, none of those tests came back to Mr. Sobotiak. So unfortunately, they didn't get what justice participants will sometimes call, a hit or a match. So there was DNA that was found that didn't relate to a particular person. And that's unfortunate, because if there had been a match, we might have more information about the case and Ms. Kaminsky's disappearance. But all of the forensic evidence that was tested, both at the time and post the ministerial review, all excluded Mr. Sobotiak, which means that it was not his DNA or any evidence linking him.
Hearing both of you talk, Stephanie, you can't help but wonder about systemic failures, potentially starting with, all the way through, right? The police investigation, disclosure, legal counsel. You're talking about Mr. Sobotiak representing himself at several stages of the appeal or the parole process. What do you believe contributed most directly to this miscarriage of justice, and where do you think the public pressure should be on judicial reform?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I think, I would sort of actually generalize this to all wrongful convictions in terms of judicial reform to start off with. I think we need to bear in mind that our system is great. Yes, the Canadian criminal justice system is quite good when you look at it in comparison to other countries. But at the same time, no justice system is ever perfect, right? And we should always be improving in ways that that make it better for the accused to be able to represent themselves and have a fair trial. And the fact of the matter is that our system is run by people, and people make mistakes, and that's just the way that it is. There's nothing we can do about it. It's a very natural thing. No one is perfect. So I think when we're thinking about reforms, there's been a lot of inquiries that have happened over the years after many high-profile wrongful convictions. David Milgaard, the first wrongful conviction of Donald Marshall Jr., Guy Paul Morin, who was actually the wrongful conviction that started Innocence Canada. And in there are a lot of reforms that are being recommended over and over and over again. And we have seen some of this happen, for example, with the Hart decision, which now makes it, we're able to look at Mr. Big investigations and say, it does not meet the Hart test, which is a two-pronged test. So, we can now take a look at it and reinvestigate and say this might be a problematic issue. So I think it's just really looking at the justice system saying, like, where can we make improvements here, there, everywhere, just to create a fair and more just system for everybody.
I want to ask. Oh, sorry, Stephanie. I think I stepped on your toes there. Do you want to continue?
Go ahead.
Okay.
No,
I guess and this ultimately, leads to bigger questions. I want to circle back on the Mr. Big thing. My understanding, Pamela, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was 2014. It was like 11 years ago or so that the Supreme Court ruled on this type of investigation, and essentially, at my layperson's level of understanding, it made a lot of evidence inadmissible in court. On the flip side, if you're an investigator, I can't imagine, the pressure on these homicide investigators, these detectives that are tasked with solving crimes and bringing people to justice, getting killers off the street, how their hands may be tied in limiting their investigative options. And that Mr. Big idea, somebody infiltrating a bike gang or sending someone into prison to pose as somebody else, have probably been pretty important, if not integral, to a lot of murder investigations. Do you have mixed feelings about this as a lawyer? If we try to walk a mile in the shoes of a homicide detective?
So I don't have mixed feelings, and I'll tell you why. First of all, I respect, of course, the pressure that's on law enforcement. I mean, when an individual goes missing or is deceased, of course, that's their job to investigate the crime and find out what happened. I think it's also important to note, though, that the Hart decision, which you referenced, and you were right in the year, it was 2014. That was a decision that was very tailored to a type of police investigations that can cause wrongful convictions, can cause false confessions. The police are still allowed to infiltrate an existing bike gang. They can go undercover and they can enmesh themselves in an organization, but they do have parameters on them. But this Mr. Big ruling relates to a very specific situation where the police themselves are creating a fictitious crime organization. They're recruiting someone who is not in this fictitious organization and trying to get them to be a part of the organization by offering extreme inducements. It's a very gradual process. In Mr. Sobotiak's case, I think it was an 11-month sort of sting where, very slowly it started out with just doing some odd jobs for money. These are individuals who are very vulnerable. They're not highly educated. They're desperate for money. In some cases, they have mental health issues. So the police are, first of all, still allowed to do these investigations, but they have to do so within the confines of the law, because we recognize that having a lot of inducements, having the threat of violence, that these police officers who are posing as fictitious crime bosses also convey how violent they are, how upset they might be if the person doesn't give them what they want, which is in this case a confession. And so what we care about is eliciting truthful confessions, not unreliable confessions. So I think the Hart decision is a very, very important decision. And I think it appropriately tailors, some of these concerns. And if the police conduct a Mr. Big investigation that meets the, that can get beyond sort of a level of reliability where the courts can feel that this confession was reliable, it can still be admissible.
That's Pamela Zbarsky, joined by Stéphanie Nowak from Innocence, Canada. Hang tight, friends. In just a second, I want to ask you about compensation. I want to ask you about Mr. Sobotiak's chances of reintegrating society that has drastically changed over the 35 years that he's served in prison. And I want to ask you a question about the death penalty. We don't talk about it a lot in Canada, but a case like this would certainly be relevant to conversations that people may have about it. More from Innocence Canada in a second in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West, The Best or Nothing. This interview, these programs don't happen without the support of Real Talk partners like our friends at the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. You can check them out online at edmontonchamber.com. Make sure you give them a follow on Instagram as well. If you take a look at their events page, you can see they've got their August Coffee with the Chamber coming up. If you're looking to grow your network, do not miss their next Coffee with the Chamber. That's coming up August 26th on the rooftop at Ice District Canadian Brewhouse. What a great venue. It's going to be beautiful up there. Last month, over 300 businesses came, mixed and mingled, connected at Commonwealth Stadium. They're expecting another great crowd this time around. You can grab your ticket online, enjoy coffee, conversation, and connections that matter. I'm also very much looking forward to hosting their 56th annual golf tournament. That's coming up on the 16th of September. It's happening at the Quarry, a full day of networking, friendly competition, and soaking up that September sunshine on one of Edmonton's best courses. Tickets are selling fast. It will sell out. So make sure you jump online to edmontonchamber.com and book your spot today. Our friends at Friesen Brothers, it's a big time of year for them. It's Hatch Chili season. And this weekend, August 9th, from 12 to 5 p.m., Hatch Chili season starts at your local Friesen Brothers. Hatch chilies are distinct peppers grown in the Hatch Valley of New Mexico. They've got a really mild heat. They're known for their smoky, buttery flavor. You can incorporate them into any dish to enhance the flavor. Of course, Friesen Brothers has their team working with these beautiful as well. I mean, if you take a look at the roasted Hatch garlic chili sourdough, the roasted garlic and hatch chili pizza, roasted garlic and hatch chili sausages made in store. They've got a hatch chili sandwich, hatch chili Gouda, for Pete's sake, for the cheese lovers out there. Learn more by popping into a Friesen Brothers today. For more than 70 years, proudly Alberta grown and Alberta owned. And our friends at California Closets reminding you they are proudly Canadian owned and operated. As a matter of fact, every installation that California Closets puts in is manufactured right here in our home province of Alberta. That journey, whether you're looking at getting your garage organized, that dream laundry room, or maybe that walk-in closet you've always wanted, it all starts with a free design consultation. You can talk to their team about the space, you can talk about your budget, and of course, you can learn more about these installations that are guaranteed for life. You can request your free consultation today at californiaclosets.ca. Stéphanie Nowak and Pamela Zbarsky joining us from Innocence, Canada. We're talking about the story of Allan Sobotiak, who spent 35 years in prison for a murder he always claimed he did not commit. Pamela, this is the charge was stayed. Is that enough? There's a lot of people that are saying this is insufficient legally and otherwise. What would be best case scenario for Mr. Sobotiak?
I mean, the justice system, I think, can never fully right any wrong that occurs. And of course, there's different options for the Crown. So I think first and foremost, it's important to note that the Minister of Justice quashed Mr. Sobotiak's conviction. They restored to him his innocence, the presumption of innocence to which he is entitled. At that point, the Crown has a few options legally at their disposal, and they decided to stay the charge, which means we are not going to continue prosecuting this man. And again, I think it all comes back to the Mr. Big confession, because without the Mr. Big confession, there's, nothing remotely close to the ability to try Mr. Sobotiak. It's very rare. It's almost unheard of for wrongly convicted people to receive an apology. We thankfully did have that in a few of our exonerations recently, but it's incredibly rare. There is no verdict of innocent. We have guilty, not guilty. So, the justice system, I think it's difficult for the justice system to, ever repair sort of the damage that is done to the system as a whole and the individual when someone's wrongly convicted. So that's sort of, how Mr. Sobotiak's case ended, but the presumption of innocence has been restored to him. And I really think that what he's trying to do, and also what we're trying to focus on as an organization, is the fact that finally, after more than 3 decades, he can at least live the rest of his life as a free man. And, it would be my personal hope for him that he can find some peace in his later years now that he was not able to have for so many decades.
Elder Taz is watching the show live in our live chat powered by Park Power. She wonders, would this man have spoken to psychologists while imprisoned, or would he have participated in programs that would assess his tendency to violence? She says, I hope that he would be assessed or would have a psychological assessment. Stephanie, people can see the work that Innocence Canada does on the website, innocencecanada.com. What types of resources would be available to people like Mr. Sobotiak that would be attempting to or would be reintegrating into society after 35 years behind bars? I can't imagine what that experience would be like.
It's very interesting. There actually really are resources once you've been wrongly convicted. It's sort of it's a bit of a shame as part of our system, is that we say, like, oops, good luck, and sort of you're off on your own. So it's going to be it's not going to be an easy road to him. As you can imagine, he went in, he was 26 years old, he's 62 now. That's your whole life. Just think about everything that happened that you missed out on in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s. not having those kinds of resources is hugely impactful. And I really think like looking at technology is one way that we can really zero in on what that means for somebody. So, you know, when Mr. Sobotiak went in, I remember this time in 1991, we still had rotary phones. You know, we still had to dial. And if you had a friend with the number 0 in your phone, you were annoyed because it had to take so long. Now you pick up, you know, this device in your pocket and the whole world is there for you. And that's just one thing. But at Innocence Canada, what we really pride ourselves on, you know, post exoneration is that these people become the wrongly convicted. They are part of our family. And so while they may not have resources, you know, sort of dedicated to them, you know, we continue to support them as best as that we can. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to continue to support Mr. Sobotiak and all the wrongly convicted to help them get back on their feet, and to help them live as peaceful and joyful a life as they can.
I also think of the family of Susan Kaminsky in all of this. For 35 years, they've believed and maybe had some peace around the idea that the person responsible, you know, for her 2 children, for their mother's death, has been behind bars. This now creates a whole new scenario for them, and even for members of the general public. The implication is that somebody either got away with murder and is no longer alive, or that somebody walks among us, a killer walks among us. Pamela, how do you suggest the average person wrap their mind around that?
I mean, it's very difficult when we talk about wrongful convictions. You know, that's a piece that we also acknowledge as well, is that while, you know, the applicant that we're representing was wrongly convicted, you know, of course, the victims themselves and their families, you know, not getting the closure that they need, or thinking they have closure, that sort of then becomes unearthed with wrongful convictions. And you know, we have a lot of empathy for that, of course. And I think that is a very difficult thing to wrap your mind around, because, you know, you rely on the system to be as perfect as it can be. And, you know, you think that you've gotten closure, only to find out years later that that wasn't actually the case. And you know, I have the utmost empathy for them and their family, as I do in, you know, all cases of wrongful conviction.
Yeah, well said. I already know how both of you are going to answer this, and typically as an interviewer, you would not ask a question you already know the answer to. But Kenzie's in our live chat right now, and she says, you know, situations like this, wrongful convictions, are basically the only reason I don't support the death penalty. And I wouldn't suggest, or I'm not implying that there's a mission in Canada to get there. I don't think that the average Canadian wants it. But how significant are cases like this or stories like this to conversation around cracking down on crime? Stephanie, you're nodding your head.
Well, it's such an interesting thing, right? Because in Canada, we don't have the death penalty, but just to the south of us, they do. And one of the things that I think, you know, here we can pride ourselves on is that we don't face that same issue. And so I think about down south, there's a man who's currently on death row, and he has been, I want to say Robertson, if I'm not mistaken, Pamela. Yeah, Robertson. He has been put on death row, but the victim says that they believe that he is innocent. The Crown says they believe that he is innocent, but yet he is continuing on through the process and scheduled to be executed in October. So this is something that we should be considering as a very valid reason not to have the death penalty, because these cases also take so long to work through. You have to think, first you have to have your trial, and then you have to appeal that before you can even apply to Innocence Canada. Then there's a waiting list. Then it takes, you know, 6 years, 10 years to reinvestigate. Then we apply to the Minister of Justice. You're looking at a long time. And so it's scary to think that we know the system is this slow, and yet we would hurry to just execute somebody when there is a potential that could be wrong.
I appreciate both of your time and sharing your expertise on this. I thank you for your advocacy on this and for helping us understand this important story. To both of you, our gratitude.
Thank you so much. Yeah, much appreciated. Thank you.
You bet. That's Pamela Zbarsky. She's lead counsel at Innocence Canada. That's also where Stéphanie Nowak is executive director. Again, you can check out innocencecanada.com. We'll get to more of your responses on this in a moment. John Rapley's standing by live from London, England. We're going to get to him. I'm not going to use the death penalty as a segue there, but we oftentimes talk about the differences, don't we, between Canada and the United States. And Dr. Rapley's been looking at that through the eyes of the context of this trade war. Of course, tariffs back in the news, Donald Trump cranking up some tariffs on Canadian exports to 35% just a few days ago. Mr. Rapley, Dr. Rapley, arguing, however, that America's losing the trade war. That coming up in 1 minute. Before we get there, the team at North Road Investment Council wants to make sure that you know where to find them. If you're a successful Canadian, one that has built a business, and you want to ensure that your wealth is being organized to deliver a successful retirement, may I suggest you take a second today to check out northroadic.com. North Road is a steady hand and a studied voice to guide you through wealth and investing. At North Road, they're working with Canadians who have built successful careers. The typical client has at least $2 million in investable assets, oftentimes coming from analytical, detail-driven professions, engineering, architecture, dentistry. If that sounds like you, the team at North Road is interested and wide open to a conversation. You can check out their website today. That's northroadic.com. You can find it under the sponsors tab on our website, ryanjesperson.com. Today is the time to start a conversation built on clarity, discipline, and true alignment. And we want to congratulate our friends at Solar by Kuby on 10 years in business. This is a remarkable success story. From 2 oil field electricians and 1 pickup truck to a team of more than 200, operating proudly out of Edmonton, Calgary, Lethbridge, Kamloops, Kelowna, you name it, Kuby is making solar doable for Canadians. Between that Canada Greener Homes Loan, programs like the Clean Energy Improvement Program, it's actually never made more sense than it has right now to go solar. You don't have to shell out the full cost up front to get started. You can turn your roof or any extra space into something that actually saves you money long term. And the team at Kuby will walk you through every step of the way. It all starts with a free solar quote. Why not cut those energy bills? Why not make a move toward a cleaner, brighter future? You can check out kuby.ca. That's kuby.ca/solar to get your free quote, or give them a call at 780-340-5829. John Rapley is a highly regarded political economist who specializes in global development, the world economy, and economic history. He's the author of a new piece published at theglobeandmail.com, Beneath the Bluster, the U.S. is losing the trade war. Joining us live from London, England. John, thank you so much for making time for us. It's nice to see you.
Morning, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. This may be of little solace to Canadians that are feeling either the pinch of Trump's tariffs, or perhaps the slowing of the economic flow between our two nations. People have changed their summer vacation plans. A lot of people, I think, just feel pressure or anxiety when these two longtime allies, the Canada-United States relationship, is strained. But what's the perspective you might suggest to Canadians who are feeling that way? Is there light at the end of the tunnel here?
Well, I think there will eventually be light at the end of the tunnel, Ryan, but I think it's little solace to anybody. The fact is that nobody's winning this trade war. And I think the thing to bear in mind, though, it's portrayed as being sort of head-to-head battles between countries, and the U.S. keeps coming out on top because it imposes higher tariffs on others than is being imposed on it. But that's, of course, the wrong way to look at it. The question is, what is it doing to the economy? And the evidence is clear. It's actually doing quite a lot of damage to the U.S. economy. So this is really just a way of sort of shooting oneself in the foot and claiming it as a victory because somebody else doesn't want to reciprocate. Canada is going to continue to feel the pain. I think one of the remarkable things, I mean, you mentioned the change in travel patterns and holidaying and the buy Canadian. There's another feature to this, which is that Canadian firms have actually quite rapidly diversified or begun diversifying towards other export markets, which is really interesting because that is the pattern we're seeing in other countries too. And I think in the long term, in other words, I think we're dealing at a period of pain, but to the extent that Canada can reduce its dependence on the US market through this process of diversification, I think in the long term, it might end up in a better place, but it's not going to feel great in the meantime.
I like how you characterize that. You say that, the U.S. may be losing the trade war, but nobody's winning. And I think that that's, if you had to sum this up in one sentence, that would probably be it. You elaborate on how, tariffs are hurting the United States and Americans more than the trading partners. Why do you think that economic and the president has been asked about this multiple times in high-profile public situations? Everybody has seen his insistence. Everybody has heard the president say, "I'm a tariff guy. I've always been a tariff guy." Why do you think that the economic reality, like that the evidence, hasn't shifted Trump's political messaging or deterred his base for that matter?
Well, I think it hasn't yet deterred his base, but we're seeing clear evidence in the polling data that he's lost independence, and that's going to become a real problem for Republicans if that continues. He never had Democrats, but and we are now seeing specifically on the inflation, political opinion on inflation, that even it is starting to make inroads even into the Republican base. People are fairly unhappy, and I don't think one can underestimate just how much inflation governs political decision making among voters in the US as in anywhere else. But it was really what lost Biden the election. And right now, Trump's polling on inflation is worse than Biden's was at his trough. So that's a bad omen of what's to come. And of course, the worst is most likely to come. The evidence we're seeing, would suggest that there are going to be fairly significant inflation rises in the coming months. And that, barring a recession, that's going to continue to really be felt by Americans. So they are paying a high price. It will be interesting to see. I mean, Trump's approval rating is very poor, particularly for this early in his presidency. And I think there's a case to be made that he has peaked, and from here on in, it's all downhill.
Dr. Rapley, as mentioned, you're joining us from London, England. Obviously, Europe feeling the pinch here. China very relevant in this conversation as well. What's the vibe among Londoners? What's the sense of how this is all playing out? Would you characterize it as demonstrably different than what people might be feeling in Canada right now?
Well, I think few places are going to feel it the way Canada's feeling it. Canada's really in the front line. It is literally in the front line. Yeah. It's right in the border. Canada allowed itself to become hugely dependent on trade with the United States for its prosperity and a relatively narrow range of goods. Industries that are themselves, exposed for the future. For example, oil and gas and automobiles are both industries which one could say have a long-term questionable future. So Canada was going to be vulnerable at the best of times. I think the mood elsewhere is, Britain is now, obviously there's, and certainly in London, there's always this question, should we go back into the European Union? We had a large market there. They are looking to broaden their trade ties elsewhere. And I think that's the case everywhere. Everybody, even though they're talking with the Americans, they're making concessions. A lot of these concessions are really just verbal. Even the trade deal between Britain and the US it's only a few pages long. It's really just an agreement to keep talking. It doesn't really amount to much of a deal at all. And I think it's really just a way to provide cover while looking for options elsewhere.
John, you write in your piece, John Rapley, our guest, if you're just joining us on the Real Talk live stream powered by California Closets at theglobeandmail.com, that China's economy growing faster than expected, an annual rate of over 5%. You say remarkably, given the turmoil, and unlike the American experience, China's exports also rose. In your assessment, is this sustainable? Could Canada, could Europe learn from what China's doing, or is it on its own planet? I mean, the population, the size of the economy, the global influence, the manufacturing capabilities and the like.
I think it will always be impossible for Canada to escape some degree of dependence on the US just because it's, the world's biggest market and it's just right there on the border. But I certainly think there are opportunities to lessen its dependence. And I think China shows a remarkable sort of example in one respect, which is that all along it just regarded as, well, we lose access to the US market. Let's look elsewhere. And with a very aggressive trade diversification. And they're taking advantage, too, of the American sort of retreat from the world to move into new markets. So they've expanded very rapidly, for example, their both investment and their trade with Africa, which is significant because that is in spite of the fact that it's a very poor continent, is very fast growing. There are many very dynamic economies there. And so that's going to be a lot of the future markets. Trump is a president who seems very much trapped in the 20th century. He's thinking of American power as if it was still 1945, and he's thinking of the world economy as if it was still 1945. And the world economy has changed tremendously. And the sort of the locus of dynamism is elsewhere. And I think that's what Canada also needs to be doing. It needs to be saying, well, look, there's a threat in this. There's also an opportunity. If if the United States is withdrawn from the world, this is the time that Canada needs to step up its presence a bit.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk about that, and I think that the average Canadian kind of wonders, what does that actually look like? What does that actually mean? Do you think that is there a viable international response? WTO reform, multilateral coalitions. You think that could rein in this kind of unilateral trade policy?
Certainly multilateral coalitions could, and I think it's rather striking how little of that coordination there has been. That had countries sort of got together and say, okay, look, the United States is picking a fight with all of us, let's sort of pull together and agree a common front on this. I mean, it would have been a very different outcome. Funnily enough, they just haven't. That's not to say it can't be done. I do think that they need to start looking at that, more carefully and more deeply, because there are opportunities there, because everybody faces this common threat. I think in one sense, the response of other countries have been positive, that rather than sort of launch a full-scale trade war as happened in the 1930s, there is, I think, a broad sort of commitment within the other countries of the world to maintaining a global trading order, to maintain some form of free trade. So rather than raise tariff barriers, other countries have actually been lowering them, recognizing that in the longer term, that's probably going to be beneficial to their producers at the expense of American producers. For example, I mean, the Japanese have to pay, they have to pay, of course, it's American consumers who pay the 15% tariff on Japanese auto imports. But by agreeing to sort of impose no tariffs on American car exports, in order to get that deal, they've actually ended up in a position where Japanese cars are now going to enjoy a price advantage over American ones, because American car producers are paying tariffs on all the inputs they're using of more than 15%. So in terms of a strategic policy, this kind of tariff policy that Trump is pursuing is totally incoherent. And so there are opportunities for countries. But in the meantime, I think in looking at, and let's begin talking more. I mean, this has already started, but let's continue talking more to the Europeans, to the Japanese, to the Koreans. But I think also there's been a reluctance on the part of the Canadian government to talk more with the Chinese, and I think they should. And certainly with India, there are countries that are in the same boat, that want to maintain sort of some kind of global trading system. And I think we need to sort of begin partnering with them more aggressively.
John, in closing, if truly nobody is winning, which is what it feels like right now, what do you think a true win-win in global trade recovery would look like? And maybe who do you think might lead it?
That's a really good question, Ryan. I mean, it may yet be that the United States leads it, in that, this policy ends up doing so much harm to the American economy that the next administration that comes in is much more committed to reestablishing the global trading order. Although I think what has changed, probably irredeemably, is that the United States will no longer be a trusted partner the way it once was, because everybody will know that, a president can come along and tear this all up. So in terms of who will lead it, now that's a really good question. We need a leader. China would seem the obvious one, but it is choosing, for now at any rate, not to play that role, which really raises the question, is this a time for other Western countries like Canada, like its European partners, to step up and actually say, let us try and pull together and yes, reform the World Trading Organization and reestablish the rules that will apply to the rest of the world. And the United States wants to tune out, let them do so. But in the meantime, the rest of us will continue advancing.
Dr. John Rapley, a political economist specialized in global development, the author of Beneath the Bluster, The U.S. is Losing the Trade War, special to the Globe and Mail, published just a couple of days ago. You can read it at theglobeandmail.com. Joining us live from London, England. John, thanks for doing this. It's great to hear from you.
It's been a pleasure, Ryan. You have a good day.
Yeah, you as well. You can let us know what you think to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Johnny, did that make you feel any better about the state of the trade relationship right now? I thought that how he hits the nail on the head right out of the gates, though.
Yeah,
right?
it's great insight.
Just because the U.S. is losing doesn't mean that anybody's winning here.
No, I don't think anyone's winning here. But it's hard to. Trump's an anomaly. He's all over the place. So people try to have insight and say, well, this is what we think he's going to do, or this is what we think he's going to do, and I always just laugh.
Yeah.
I just laugh but I do agree with his sentiment. Maybe Trump's not in 1945, but I definitely think he thinks this is like mid 1980s, early 19. He thinks this is like the heyday for America. And like John said, trade has changed. Countries have changed. China is a mega power.
Yeah.
And if they can't get something from the States, their manufacturing needs, they supply the entire world with electronics, vehicles, tons of other things, like everything. You could grab anything in this room right now. And I'm not saying we try to buy Canadian, but most products
a lot
are
of
made.
Stuff is made in China.
And they will go elsewhere and they will have it manufactured where else they can, because they've got contracts and they've got deadlines as well. So I do think Trump is kind of stuck in like a 1980s kind of heyday,
or at least 1980s pre Canada-U.S. free trade agreement.
100%.
That was like I don't remember the exact. I think 87, but like the exact year. But that was where everything kind of like for a lot of people economically felt like so many barriers had been reduced and trade could flourish and the economies could thrive and the like. John makes a very good point where he says, moving forward, how might other trading partners, how might other nations feel about the United States? Might there be a wariness or a mistrust? And it's obvious why. I would also suggest that this may be, this is like, we talk a lot about how Donald Trump is like different than any other politician, different than any other president in American history, like by miles. You could compare and contrast the legacies or the trade positions or whatever between, pick Republican presidents if you want. How different is George H.W. Bush to W, or how different are they both to Nixon or whatever. But at the same time, Trump is just like completely different, and you kind of wonder. I find myself sometimes wondering, who will succeed Donald Trump? Who will the next American president be? Will it? You get into these. I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but when you talk about leadership and succession in political parties, political movements. One of the things plaguing the Democrats in the United States right now is that there's no clear leader.
Sure.
And you could say the same thing about the Republicans in the sense that their leadership is very strong and united under Donald Trump, right? Everybody's sort of like walking to his beat, marching to his drum, so to speak. And other prominent Republicans, Cruz, Rubio, whoever you want to talk about, there's lots, are sort of walking in line. So like who's next, you don't know. And so it's hard to kind of forecast, assuming that something bonkers doesn't happen, which it could, assuming that Donald Trump, agrees. I can't even believe we're talking about this right now, but, to like at the end of his second term, to respect the American Constitution and to not try to stick around for longer, you will have another president, regardless of whether it's a Democrat or a Republican.
Yeah.
And so what will their approach be to repairing relationships, to working on strengthening new trade partnerships with longtime allies like Canada, like Britain, like China, and others. So it's an interesting conversation. You're not going to find somebody, I don't think, smarter than Rapley on this. I appreciate his take on it. But we welcome feedback from our audience, too, to talk at RyanJesperson.com.
Yeah, and just in terms of who takes over after Trump, I think he'll figure out a way. I don't buy into this whole kind of fear that, he's going to change laws and do things like that and stay in power for decades. But I do think he'll figure out a way, Don Jr. or maybe his daughter or something. He'll figure out a way to keep the family name in there so that he's still, in the White House, drinking Cokes, eating cheeseburgers, pretending he has all the power. I do see that happening. I could totally see Don Jr. or his daughter making a run for the presidency, and I could totally see them getting elected. But that teeters on, like John said, like this is a very precarious presidency because, yes, he does have so much support from the Republican Party. But if you lose that, there's entirely no support from the left. Even Republican presidents of the past had a bit of support on both sides, right? Just looking at his approval ratings today, they're down 2 points, which isn't huge. But you are seeing more political pundits, podcasters, people who were like all fired up about Trump being like, you know, I was listening to a podcast the other day and the texters texting in and the chatters on the live stream were like, dude, you were the one pushing for Trump. And the host, I don't want to say their name on this show because whatever, but the host basically said like, look, I didn't vote for Trump to do this and to do that. I voted for him to, you know, shrink government, to reduce spending, all these things that he has not done. And then he said, well, the one thing he did do, which I was on board with, was lowering immigration or sending illegal immigrants back to their country. But like, he could teeter really fast, right? Yeah. And he could lose all of this.
I will say this, and I'll reference reporting by The Independent. Trump certainly doesn't look like with his plans for this $200 million ballroom. We can show it to you in a second here. But like, check this out. So he was up on the roof of the White House the other day. Did you see this?
Yeah.
A $200 million ballroom plan. They want to add a new complex to the White House.
Yeah. Keep that money rolling in.
That doesn't look to me like somebody who's getting ready to leave.
No, not at all.
I don't know.
This is the White House Sky Palace.
It's
exactly what it is.
Have you seen, like, people are outraged at what this will do to the footprint of what they're describing as one, you know, easily. It's got to be America's most iconic building. Yeah, you can see here journalists asking, what are you doing on the roof? Mr. President, what are you doing up there? He says, taking a little walk.
Looking at the blueprint.
They say, come down to talk to us. What are you building? They want details on this $200 million White House ballroom. He's turning the White House into Mar-a-Lago. That's what he's doing.
But that's what Trump, like, you can't tell me Trump gets up every day and is like, oh, I can't wait to get to that briefing. I can't wait to change people's lives for the better. He's thinking about the next little shindig where he can get more investors, get more money, where he can start more projects, where he can, you know, that's all he's done his whole life. I don't see at this stage in his life, you know, him turning around and all of a sudden being super interested. You can just tell by his demeanor, like government policy, you know, things like that. That doesn't excite him, I don't think.
I don't think so. It's probably not why he's in politics.
I mean,
different people get in politics for different reasons,
and the drama probably excites him a bit because that's his thing.
Are you saying that there would be a different approach, like if Bernie Sanders was president?
I'm saying and I'm not saying this could happen, but I'm saying if his daughter was in there, I think things would be better. I think she would have a need to, you know, assert herself and to maybe, you know, create some policy that helps people. I'm not saying like.
Are you campaigning?
No, I'm not at all. I'm just saying I think out of the family, I think Donald, like, let's be honest. Did he even think he was going to win the first time? Probably not. And then he got a little taste of it.
Nobody thought he was going to when he first entered the
He probably thought
race.
it was a promotional thing for himself, right?
Kenzie is quite right. And the chat says Canada's been trying to diversify its markets for many years. It's
True.
not easy, especially when government policies have been against it. Jordan 390 says the Chinese are building economic fealty around the world. Bucky says if the multilateral system is to be preserved, it needs reform to ensure that the benefits flow to all economies, not just the big powers. Says the rules now were all written to fit the Americans, not the world. Ms. KD, thanks for your YouTube channel membership. Ms. KD says, I think Mark Carney's unique insight into global strengths and weaknesses are an advantage in knowing where to strike deals. Bucky goes on to say, I think that Canada has been pursuing free trade agreements across the world, and it's well positioned to diversify its markets and supply chains.
Sure.
I mean, that's impacting how people feel. Like I'm talking back here, you know, here in Canada and across Canada, including and I certainly don't speak for everybody, obviously, in places like British Columbia and Quebec, where some Canadians are saying that they're more open. You know, just talking about energy expansion here.
Yeah.
There's a million different ways that Canada can expand its economy, and there are many promising industries where Canada can be a world leader that don't have anything to do with pipelines. But an obvious one for global market expansion is pipeline expansion, and it's interesting to see pollsters show how attitudes are changing in some regions of the country that have typically pushed back or where pipeline expansion has been a non-starter.
Yeah. And also, if we're going to diversify our economy, like it's probably the only good thing that came out of the tariffs. We just got to trade better with each other. Like that's the first thing we have to fix that we're still working on, right?
Yeah,
like,
no kidding. Shauna Feth was talking about that last time she was on. Yeah, President and CEO of the Alberta Chambers of Commerce. More on this in a bit. I want to get more into the live chat. We got to chat about our feature interview today, presented by our friends at Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West, the story of Allan Sobotiak. That's a wild one as well. And I want to pick your brains on that. We kind of went back-to-back jacks with those two interviews. But, once a week, every Wednesday, courtesy of our friends at Tourism Jasper, we have a chance to step outside the news cycle and celebrate the memories that lie in wait in beautiful Jasper National Park. This is goes without saying, I hope, one of the most wonderful times to head out to Jasper National Park. It's been just over a year since that wildfire swept through parts of Jasper. Obviously a stark and smoky reminder of how fragile and how fierce the natural world can be. Definitely a tough summer last year. But this summer, I am thrilled to let you know we've got multiple reports from Real Talkers that have sent us photos, that have written into the show. Jasper is blooming again, literally. The wildflowers are back. From the Valley of the Five Lakes to the shoulder of one of my favorite peaks in the world, Pyramid Mountain, wildflowers are painting the park in bold, defiant color. Fireweed, whether the name is ironic or not, has exploded across these burn areas. We've been hearing from people who have just been taken aback by the natural beauty of those vibrant pink spires, like nature's comeback flag, basically. Indian paintbrushes bursting in firecracker reds. Lupines are lining the trails in blues and purples, dancing in the breeze. And up high, where the snow has only just melted, these delicate glacier lilies. These are some of my favorites if you're lucky enough to see them on backcountry hikes. They're peeking out again, bright yellow and possibly brave. Beautiful for sure, but symbolic, right? This wildflower season is reminding us of what resilience actually looks like. The fact is, biologically, scientifically, a lot of these flowers need fire. They've evolved with it, and some of these seeds are only germinating when fire clears the forest floor, makes space and light for something new to grow. And so what looked like destruction last summer is turning out to be rebirth in 2025. Whether you're hiking Wilcox Pass, maybe you're riding the Jasper Sky Tram, I highly recommend that as a wonderful family-friendly outing, or maybe you're just taking a breath at Medicine Lake. It's not always just about the view. It's about gratitude and perspective and a quiet understanding that this place, like all of us, can go through hell and still come back more vibrant than ever. Our friends at Tourism Jasper have published a wonderful resource at jasper.travel. We'll link to it specifically in the show notes on the podcast and on YouTube, where you can find wildflowers in Jasper National Park. Whether you're a professional or amateur photographer, whether you're just going to burn the images into your brain, I highly recommend you check that out. And we also want to put a new Jasper business on your radar. Maybe grab a coffee, stock up on unique goods for your next hike. As you're heading out to search for those beautiful wildflowers, Otto's Cash is now open. You can grab a coffee. You can check out their menu online. They pride themselves at Otto's on offering a carefully curated selection of goods that capture the spirit and beauty of Jasper. They've got gourmet cheese. They've got wonderful fine meats, freshly baked bread, specialty condiments. John, I'm a big mustard guy. You can never have too many types of mustard in your fridge, friends. As far as I'm concerned, there's something to satisfy every palate at Otto's. You can enjoy a delicious cup of coffee in there or take it to go. They've got a thoughtful selection of camping knickknacks, household goods. So whether you're hiking, camping, or just wandering around town, Otto's Cash has everything you need to make your journey more tasty, convenient, and memorable. Make sure you check them out in Jasper, in person, right along Connaught Drive there. And you can see more about Otto's on Tourism Jasper's website. That's jasper.travel. Every week, MyJasper Memories, proudly presented right here on Real Talk by our friends at Tourism Jasper. Had a quick planning meeting just the other day about Tee Up for Tots. That's coming up at the end of August. We're going to be heading out there to the Jasper Park Lodge. This is an annual fundraiser for the Stollery. They raised $1.1 million, if you can believe it, in 24 hours last year. And I know that everybody's really excited to get back out there and play that golf course too. It's the 100th year, the 100th season of the Jasper Park Lodge Golf Course, of course, designed by Stanley Thompson. If you want to hear from Talon Sweeney, he's the director of golf operations out there. He's essentially the big cheese at the golf course there at the JPL. Make sure you check out our July 24th episode as we marked 1 year since the fire. Talon was one of our guests, talked to us about changes in the course and what they did to be able to get that open in time for Canada Day for that July 1st opening. Super Chat Ken kicking in $5 into the Super Chat, I guess to ensure that his joke was read. Ken, we would have read this anyway. This is fabulous. He says, regarding Trump on the roof at the White House, his doctor told him he had shingles, so he had to check for himself. Well done, Ken. Super Chat Ken with the $5 contribution. Johnny just shaking his head. It's not easy. It's not easy to get away with a dad joke these days. And so, Super Chat Ken, congratulations on that.
Shingles ain't funny. You ever had shingles?
No. I didn't even know what they were.
I had no
until
idea.
A friend of mine
I had
did.
them like I think it was like 6 years ago. I don't know why I had them so young, but they are no joke, man. They can incapacitate you.
It's basically like chicken pox, right?
I don't know. It was
Kinda?
it was on the sides of me. It was like a parental, like a wings or something. It was weird. It was very strange, but like I guess I was just run down. Maybe I was stressed. Maybe I was sick for a bit, but man, it hampers, like you can't walk at some points. It's insane.
There are two sort of like health ailments that I knew nothing about until friends grappled with them. Shingles was one of them, and gout was the other. I had no idea about gout. And I know for a lot of people, like, you know, Biz Nasty's been talking about that on Spit and Chicklets. He's been doing it.
You gotta eat vegetables, man.
Because he eats nothing but red meat.
It's like,
and then a buddy of mine in Calgary who probably wouldn't want to be named based on what I'm about to say, but I think just basically like drank way too much for way too long.
Drinking and red meat,
and red meat.
Will
If you're like if you're a beer and beef guy, you're not mixing in any broccoli into the mix.
Not even that. It's just like I don't know why every meal, any restaurant you go to, it's always like meat is the main thing, right? You got to mix in some grains, you got to mix in veggies, you got to mix in fruits. Try a pasta for your main instead of like. But Biz was. I mean, he was way over the top. Like I listened to 3 different shows he was on, and like. That guy, like, people were literally telling him, like, you are going to get gout. And he was like, what's that? Like,
what's gout?
And they're like,
you're about to find out.
They're like, dude, like, you can't have steak for 3 meals every single day.
Well, this is that caveman diet that everybody talks about. And don't ever take nutritional information from us, by the way.
No.
But I've heard a lot of people talking about the caveman diet. There's other names for it that I think are maybe like I think keto is like similar to it.
Yeah.
We're going to hear from a dietitian that's like, will you guys please just stop talking about this? You have no idea what you're talking about. Johnny has more of an idea than I do.
Are you talking about like the Liver King, like the paleo?
Well, basically like people that like figure that if you just eliminate carbs, and sugars and just load up on protein, that's, you know, a way to get healthier. And so basically you'll see people, and it's like hilarious to see, you know, it's like, you know, you go to your favorite steakhouse and you're just ordering these like 18-ounce ribeyes or like, you know, you're ordering these like massive slabs. And then it's like, what would you like for a side? It's like, jus? Nothing.
Just sipping on au jus.
Mustard, you know?
I always think those paleo those guys there's so many podcasts, so many websites, so many like promotions, advertising aimed towards this whole like carnivore diet and paleo and everything. And they're like, we need to get back to like when we lived off the land and everything. And all I can think is like, we lived like 30 years max back then.
Yeah.
When and you know everyone's like, well, you know, there's GMOs in the food and the water's contaminated. I'm like, well, you know, when cavemen were running around, the water was clear, the air was unpolluted, the game was free range, and they ate it by literally raw.
Yeah.
And people
were also being hunted by saber-toothed tigers.
But I'm just saying, even in the early 1900s, people were living to like 40 years old. We're very lucky today to be living to like 80 years old.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I know that's mostly due to, and you know, this is a trigger for some people too, but like obviously prenatal care, vaccines, all these other things that we have access to, right?
Vaccines work?
Or postnatal care, sorry. Postnatal care.
Who is it here? 80s Fanify says, I got the shingles vaccine. Says, I saw a coworker suffer
I'm thinking
through
of
that.
getting it because it was so bad.
Well, get it.
It
Get
was
it.
so bad.
I got to check I have like one of those cards.
was-
This is like my card is from when I was a kid. There's these books, and you got to carry them when you travel, so you can, you know, prove your inoculation. Different countries have different requirements, but it's still like it's old school. It's like when we used to take out library books and they would like stamp the date, and stamp the back of the library book. I love that stuff. But Ken, by the way, Super Chat Ken follows up. He says, Jespo, I gave you guys the funds, the $5, because I love you guys and I love your show. He says, reading the joke is just a bonus.
Oh.
Thanks, buddy. Darren says he's had shingles twice, says that shit hurts. Vamp Fashion says shingles is basically your nerves telling you that you're on fire.
Yeah.
Sounds like a nightmare. Jordan reporting that gout is painful. I know. The guy, buddy of mine in Calgary, I'm not going to name him because he probably doesn't want to be named about it, but like,
It's kind of an
he's
embarrassing thing to get, right?
He's like a maniac as a compliment. Like his toughness is no one questions this guy's toughness. This guy is tough as nails, and I saw gout bring that guy to his knees, literally. And so that's all I ever needed to know about gout. All I ever needed to hear about. Some of you are talking about Jordan Peterson's diet. I'll leave that one alone because I don't know enough about it, but I do know that he was talking a lot about just eating red meat. Ms. Katie says, used to try every new diet, says in my misguided youth, trying to lose weight at 120 pounds. Jeez. Says, I went on the lemonade cleanse.
Jesus.
I don't even think it's lemonade. Lemonade is gentle, right? Isn't it just basically lemon
It's like
juice?
the homemade stuff.
Right? Yeah, the homemade. Like, he's got all kinds of wild stuff. And there says the blood type diet, Atkinson's. She just says, oh, my God. Yeah. So, I would imagine, you know, our recommendation would be to talk to your doctor, talk to a registered dietitian or a nutritionist. We should do a show on that coming up. That'd be good.
Yeah. Also, we know nowadays that like it's moderation and a bit of everything. That's what you need. Like you don't like these fad diets, you know, sticking to one thing or whatever. Like you need a bit of everything. You need some vitamins, and if you know you're not getting it, then you should supplement. Take a multivitamin because that fills in the gaps or whatever. But no one supplement, no one diet is going to make you like superhuman, right?
No. Shout out to Darren, by the way, who points out the shingles vaccine recommended for adults aged 50 or over, as well as those aged 18 or older who are at an increased risk due to weakened immune systems.
Dude, when I had it, I was like, okay, now I get it when it's a big deal when older people get this.
Yeah.
Because it literally can keep you bedridden and like it feels like I felt like I was going to die. It was horrible. I was like, plus I was mad at myself. I'm like, why do I have this?
Yeah.
I must be unhealthy at my age to get shingles. And I probably was at the time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Miss Katie, by the way, follows up the lemonade diet or whatever she says was lemon. What an interesting combo. Lemon juice, maple syrup, and cayenne pepper.
That's what I was going to say. The cayenne pepper.
Cayenne's what'll get
the
ya.
hot pepper diets are crazy too, where people just drink like hot juices for like weeks. And that's pretty much it. It's like you're drinking spicy soup or whatever. That's horrible for you.
Yeah, no kidding.
None of those cleanses, like none of them really work. You can't clean out your liver and your organs by drinking, you know, lemons and hot pepper. It's just not the way things work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, you can probably this is again a layperson's understanding of it. You can probably put your digestive system into some sort of trauma where, you know, I mean, people will, you know, but if you're like looking at home remedies for things like colon cleanses as an example, do you ever take a second and just wonder
like
what might go wrong? What is any decision you're making in life, especially the DIYs? You know, what is worst case scenario? And I think in this case, homemade remedies involving your digestive tract or your internal passageways would probably qualify for that.
Lots of people commenting here who had shingles saying it was a period of high stress. I was very stressed at the time too, so maybe that was a cause for it. But yeah.
Maybe. Interesting. I think that this is kind of indicating an interest. The live chat powered by Park Power is kind of coming alive on this. We should get a couple of like dietitians, medical experts in to talk about this kind of thing. It is also a good time for us to let you know and just remind you that coming up on the 11th of August and this is going to be an in-studio interview, which is really cool. We have the co-stars of the Doc Talk podcast.
Oh, I love them.
Drs. Shazma and Dr. Sheila are going to join us here. Shazma, of course, Shazma Mathani is a well-known Albertan, practices in the ER at the Royal Alexandra Hospital, which is one of the busiest ERs in the country, by the way. It's the busiest ER in Alberta. And she's also in the ER at the Stollery Children's Hospital. She also does some sort of instructing in the medical school at the University of Alberta. So she's busy as hell. She's got a fantastic social media presence. Really, I think, feels a calling toward public information and advocacy. And she's partnered up. Sheila, a physician, a family doc out of Eastern Canada in Ontario, she's going to be joining us as well. Her family is coming out to travel Western Canada, and she's agreed to take a morning and join us in studio. So that's coming up on Monday, the 11th of August, which I highly recommend you check out. And then, Johnny, I haven't even told you this, but we did just confirm the following show. That'll be the 12th of August on the Tuesday. Dr. Mark Tyndall is going to join us to talk about vaping.
Nice.
We've had a lot of, when we ask Real Talkers to, let us know what you'd like to see on the show. What's a subject that you'd like to see covered that you haven't by, some of your favorite podcasts. We've seen vaping as a recurring topic.
Sure. Yeah. Nicotine in general. I think he can give us some insight on just.
Absolutely.
It's very popular nowadays. Nicotine pouches,
these little
vaping,
lip pillows.
And it's all to get away from actually smoking. But it'll be great to ask some questions like, is this actually healthier? And do we even know? Because it hasn't been, a trend for that long, right?
Yeah.
We don't have decades of research yet.
Yeah, 100%. Also, just a random shout out. I see Tommy Temper in our chat says he's going to be driving his 91 Mustang Cobra in the St. Albert Rockin' August event coming up on Friday. St. Albert always does it up big time on that. Did you have a 91 Mustang Cobra? That would have been, there were two cars that I wanted. And I did not have the hair to reflect it at the time. I wasn't what you would refer to at that time as a banger. No offense, Tommy. I know you'll take it as a compliment. But the 91 Mustang Cobra and the 77 Firebird Trans Am, those were like the two cars that I desperately wanted. Anytime that era of Mustang, the GT, I always felt for the folks that had decided to go. Was it the 4-cylinder or a V6? It was like
I have no idea.
It was like a 2.6 liter. It was like the Mustang. It was like the why'd you buy it Mustang? Do you know what I mean? And then there was the 5-liter. And then there was the odd Mustang owner that would buy the 5.0 badges and stick them on their V6 or their 4-cylinder Mustang. But it was always, to this day, that era, 91, 92, 93 Mustang, the GT, those will stop me in my tracks to this day. Is there a car that you always wanted, a car in high school that you just like, I'm going to use a heavy word here, John. Is there a car that you lusted over in high school that you've never really gotten over?
I'm not an auto, what do you call a combustion sexual? I don't know. I'm not
a petrosexual.
Cars don't really get me going. They don't turn me on. They don't get the stuff going. But like when I was younger, I remember we've already talked about it. Like I wanted weird cars, like Volkswagen Beetle or like Z24. Remember we talked about that? I was obsessed with the Z24.
I thought I was correcting you. I said, "Do you mean the Z28, the IROC?" You go, "No, the Z24."
Yeah.
Kyle, fact checking for me, says I'm thinking of the 2.3 liter inline 4, the Mustang. Tommy says his is the 5.0 high output.
Gibberish.
And
I don't know what's
Don
going on
says. Don's trying to pick a fight in our live chat, which, as long as you're respectful, we don't mind a healthy arguing. Don says the Mustang was the ultimate POS. He describes it as the K car of Ford. Whoa. Wow. Fighting words for one of Ford's greatest selling cars. Tony, I knew that this would get everybody started. Jordan wanted the 71 Roadrunner with a Hemi. Gizmo, the 76 Nova Super Sport. Tony's boyfriend had a 69 Camaro Candy Apple Red. She says, I loved that car more than I loved him. Nobody could blame you. Greg, the 72 Dodge Dart with the 340. I could do this all day, guys. Gabe C., the orange 2.3 liter Mercury Capri, 1980. No power whatsoever. I love that. And Darren says, Johnny, just wait until you get your first EV. You will finally, truly fall in love.
I'll be in love. I can't wait to. You know what I'm most looking for is just starting the engine in minus 30 and just having that heat in 1 second instead of having to wait. Right now, I'm lucky if by the time I get to work in my 20-year-old vehicle now, if it's warm and on hot days if it's cool, because like the air conditioning, the heating is so temperamental. But I can't wait. That's the one thing I've heard about EVs that is just like, as soon as you turn the vehicle on,
instant heat, instant cool,
boom,
whatever you want,
boom,
right there. T6 is playing peacemaker in the chat. Says picking the fight about the Mustang. Says he's talking about the Mustang 2, not the Fox body Mustang. Okay, to clarify. Elder Taz letting us know she's signing up. What's up, Taz? Great to see your name in there. Thanks for joining us. Tommy following up with a bit of a flex says he used to own. I'm gonna have to back away from the microphone so I can do this comment justice. He says I used to own. Is this true? He says he used to own Ric Flair's 2010 Camaro Supercharged Super Sport. And then he says, woo!
I think he means a version of it.
The
I don't
Ric
think
Flair.
He means the actual.
Well, he says Ric Flair's Camaro. Like, was it or was it not? I don't know. Vamp says the 58 Chevy, the best ever made, followed by the 53 Cadillac and Chev. Okay, guys, I hate to cut it off.
All these cars we're talking about, we should mention Mercedes.
Yeah, well, we're talking classics. Wise Kyle quite rightly suggests that we should point out the Mercedes AMG GT. Yes, I mean if we're talking
there are
about
many electric vehicles
if we're
talking
about supercars, or the one that I'm driving right now, which is absolutely beautiful. You need room for the family, but you still want a little get up and go. I would highly recommend the GLE 53 AMG, which you can purchase or lease at your Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West dealer, which we are proud to partner with. Gizmo says his brother had a 67 Javelin. It was gorgeous. Tony's first car, a 1977 Monte Carlo. I could do this for ages. Hey, to get serious for a second, because I wanted to ask you about this. We rolled one interview into the next based on John's availability out of London. Obviously, the story of this Roy Allan Sobotiak released, I mean, exonerated, I guess, technically, but not legally. Charges, his second-degree murder charge stayed after 35 years in prison. It's an absolutely wild story to try to wrap your mind around. And in the interview, tried to reflect the perspectives from different angles, like Mr. Sobotiak himself, who insisted on his innocence, aside from that Mr. Big confession, insisted on his innocence from day one. There was no physical evidence tying him to the crime scene. He advocated for himself for the duration of his incarceration. You think of the family here, of this woman who died here, the woman who was killed, which is also, I couldn't even imagine wrapping my mind around that. You think that the person that killed your sister, your daughter, your mom has been behind bars, and then you find out 35 years later that the courts have found that there's no evidence to suggest that the conviction was in due faith, that justice was actually served. Canadians' bigger picture, even looking at the Supreme Court, admittedly 11 years ago, but basically putting a stop to that investigative technique, that so-called Mr. Big technique, where they get guys. I mean, I think of a case, an obscure case out of Red Deer, but I know it because I covered it as a young reporter. Walter Raymond Anderson, this guy that had killed a disabled man that was working at a hotel overnight, pushed him down the stairs, stabbed him, robbed him. I mean, just a heinous and unprovoked crime. He was arrested based on Mr. Big testimony, right? Trying to sort of get his way into a gang. They asked him give us your credential, give us your street cred, tell us what you've done. And he basically spells out the crime, providing details that ultimately implicated him. A lot to take away from that conversation.
Yeah.
What stuck out at you?
Obviously his plight, and then just, I tried to look up some of the details, but there's no Wikipedia page for this case, right?
No.
So I was looking at actual court documents, so it was taking me a long time to figure out, but just hearing some of the stuff, he was given alcohol during his confession.
Yeah. Right.
Doesn't
that seem ridiculous?
How do you even get convicted? But this was back in the day, right? So, and I also want to go to the other side. A family who got a confession and believed this for 3-4 decades, man, that must be horrible as well. And now where do you go from here? I mean, obviously the courts assume he didn't do it. There isn't enough evidence. So if he didn't do it, a killer went loose. Did he kill other people? He or she kill other people?
That's what I was
Are they still out there? Did they, it's just horrible. But I mean, advances in technology are great these days. Obviously, since DNA in the 90s, we've come a long way. But now, I mean, people are scared of it right now. But I think AI, maybe in like 5-10 years, is going to play a role also in determining guilt or things like that. And I know people don't like that. People don't like talking about AI at all. But I mean, you know, people either think it's the best thing since sliced bread or they're deathly afraid of it. I feel like there's no middle ground on AI. But I think that could help, you know, determine and help in investigative processes as well. Yeah, AI just getting so. I'm just listening to stuff today because, you know, like the military, not to bring to kind of veer off here, but like, you know, like cell phone, GPS, all these technologies we get, like the military, government, large corporations have access to it years before we do, right? They're testing it, they're putting it out in the field, and many times, like when we're using, like even the phones we're using now and the AI we're using now, huge corporations and government have stuff that they're testing and using that is 5x, 10x as powerful. And some of the AI stuff is just, it is absolutely insane what it can do. And it's, you know, I don't want to say it's starting to think for itself, but I was looking at research the other day where like certain companies have been using really powerful supercomputers to boost AI even more. And it's been doing stuff like, you know, so they test it to say like, hey, we're going to shut you down. Like, you know, we no longer need this AI software or whatever. And the AI, because it was running the company's whole, you know, software and email and everything, there was a story of an AI that went into a CEO's email to do searches to find inconsistencies or adultery or you know, what? To try and blackmail, you know, people who worked for the company to try and keep itself running a little longer. There were instances where
they called the AI Coldplay.
It rewrote parts of its code to extend its runtime because they would set the runtime from like, you know, 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. and it rewrote parts of its code to get a couple extra hours a day. So its runtime would go to 7 p.m. or 8 p.m.
Wild.
Yeah. So
Jordan says AI is becoming self-aware. Yeah, I mean, bringing it back to the judicial application, I think it's fascinating, and it will be fascinating to better understand how some of these tools, and we're not just like you talk about forensic investigations and DNA, obviously, like, you know, revelations around DNA changed investigative, you know, processes like to a magnitude that you can't exactly, I mean, you know, what do you say? I mean, that was like turning the lights on. I mean, that just like changed everything. And you know that people have been exonerated based on DNA evidence years later that proves that it was not them. That was not their blood sample. That was not their semen. That was not them. But again, it reiterates that it was somebody else. And I just want to say one more time, and I want to say her name, like the Mr. Sobotiak, yes, 100%, you know, wrongfully convicted, nightmare scenario. You know, we referenced, you know, stories out of the gates today, of course. Like you think of David Milgaard, like probably the most prominent story in Canada, in part probably because of the Tragically Hip's song about him, Wheat Kings. But David Milgaard's mom, I think of his mom and I think of her advocacy. But there are, like Sobotiak, it has the longest serving sentence based on wrongful conviction in Canadian history, 35 years. I think of him, of course, but you think of Susan, they called her Susie Kaminsky, who, you know, she disappeared, 34 years old, single mother of two, in 1987, her body never found. I think of her family, you know, I think of her kids, I think of her older sister, Liz. We're showing you a piece in the Edmonton Journal right now. Nightmare began 1 year ago. This was written by journalist Florence Lovey at the time. This was written in 1988, you know, describing the year that's been a nightmare, emotional stress, feelings full of despair and loneliness. You know, you try to walk miles in the shoes of families that are enduring this hell. You know, the family accepting that Susie is probably dead. Her body may never be found. Says her sister in this interview in 1988, the hardest thing to live with at this point is knowing that her murderer is still a free person and hasn't been convicted yet.
100%.
So then when an arrest happens, when charges are laid, when the second-degree murder charge is laid, when a conviction happens, when he's doing time, then a part of you'll never fully be, obviously, you'll never recover, you'll never heal. You know, you've lost someone in such a horrific fashion.
100%.
But there's some sense of peace that the person responsible is being held legally accountable. And then now, 35 years later, you go, oh,
There's
I can't even imagine.
Well, you gained closure. You did whatever you had to do. You talked to people. Maybe you went to therapy. You came to terms with something. And then now that door's just been opened in you again, over 3 decades later. I can't even imagine. But just to bring it back to AI, for old cases like this, I'm not saying AI will make decisions on people's guilt, but at the very least, for old cases like this, where let's say they're going to go back and try and find the actual killer, the files they're going to have to look through and things like that, like nothing was computerized the way it is back in 1987 when this happened. That's where AI can help. Research, analysis, workflow, stuff like that, and it can do it in seconds, right? So that can help us to possibly, go through old case files, maybe find, I mean, I don't want to give the family hope they're ever going to find the perpetrator of this. But if it can do any kind of help, it's that. Going back and looking through thousands of documents within seconds. Right?
Absolutely, 100%. Let us know what you think about this. You can leave a comment on our YouTube episode. Leave a comment on Spotify, which would be great. And you can also send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. We've got a whole bunch coming in for the flamethrower this week. That's coming up on Friday's episode, presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. If you've got something you want to get off your chest, we've got a response to our Jasper documentary conversation with journalist Lisa McGregor. Bob in Jasper is all pissed off about that. We're going to give him the floor. We've also got some feedback on my conversation yesterday with Sharon Carr about what's happening in Gaza and in particular the humanitarian crisis that's affecting children. We know that that's divisive subject matter. It's heartbreaking subject matter for sure. And we also want to let you know that conversation will continue in our next episode of the show. More details on that in a quick second. But first, for those of you that are intrigued by, for example, AI and how it's impacting business and industry, how it's impacting the world around us, you probably won't be surprised to hear that there's a course for that. At Athabasca University, literally hundreds and hundreds of programs and courses that are available whenever and wherever you are. That's the whole idea behind the AU Advantage, world-class accredited online degrees and courses, including an MBA, designed so you can complete your education when it works. Not everybody's able to attend a brick-and-mortar university Monday to Friday, 8 to 3. Canada's open university, Athabasca University, works in unique fashion, and that's why tens of thousands of Canadians count themselves among program and course alumni from over 100 countries, if you can believe it. It's your education, your way, with an open admissions process. We talked learned a short time ago about how Athabasca University is removing barriers to post-secondary education. And you can learn more about that, the AU Advantage, by checking out their website today. That's athabascau.ca. We also want to make sure that UCAN Youth Services is all over your radar. We're so proud to partner with this nonprofit charitable organization that's helping young people out of harm's way and onto a path of economic independence. You can learn more about events that they have coming up. You can learn more about their partnerships that they have. They have amazing partnerships with employers across the Metro Edmonton region. You can make sure that the training, these young people aged 18 to 24 are getting the education that they need to enter the workforce in entry-level construction jobs, as an example, entry-level hospitality jobs, as an example. And, of course, the benefit for these employers is significant. Number one, you're doing a good thing. You're helping out those around you. But number two, of course, you're tapping in to a reliable and motivated workforce. You can learn more about corporate partnerships today by visiting their website. That's ucan.ca. Now, we get a lot of people talking about AI right now. Quite fascinating. Somebody says, Jordan says, AI is a great tool, but not for decision-making. Whiterium says it's not affecting children, says it's affecting humans. I saw an interesting clip yesterday, a video from Dr. Gabor Mate, who basically said, he says in the case of children or grandchildren, took a really strong stance on tech, not just AI, but screens. Said if it was up to him, if he was calling the shots, kids under the age of 18 would never have access to screens unless they were with their parents. And he gave the specific scenario, he said, of kids talking to their grandparents or loved ones on a FaceTime or Zoom call. He says that's about the only time he'd put kids in front of tablets. It'll be interesting to see how people's relationships with technology evolves. We have obviously wearable technology. People talk about implantable technology.
I was just thinking of
you know,
I mean, it's people think it's a scary future, but who knows? I mean, we were talking about aliens yesterday. Maybe when they come down here, they're already integrated with machines, and that's all like silicon. I don't know, but I do see a future where like we already know the benefits of like heart valves or whatever. I'm not talking about crazy things where like they control your thoughts. I'm just talking about how AI and how artificial intelligence, artificial everything is going to help us. It's going to help us to live longer, live healthier. And there will be some downsides. And of course there will be some crazy people, probably Elon Musk, who want to install a Gronk chip in your head and, hey, do you want to be the best, musician in the world?
I kind of do.
This chip will allow you to compose the most incredible songs, better than the Beatles ever did.
It'll kind of, it'll actually make real the hypothetical exercise that people have bandied about for a long time, which is like, someone will say like, I would pay an arm and a leg to be able to play guitar like him.
I have writer's block.
Right?
Well, this chip can give you,
This chip can turn you into Margaret Atwood. How's that? Hey, before we wrap, we just wanted to let you know, or as we wrap, let me say what's coming up in the next couple of episodes of the show. Gizmo, I saw you in the live chat talking about Thomas Lukazik and that Forever Canada petition. He's going to be joining us on a Friday. That's coming up on Real Talk. That's the 8th of August. We'll get into it as they're trying to keep Alberta in Canada. Can they get their 300,000 signatures? On our next episode, the 7th of August, we're going to be talking to Raja Khoury and Jeffrey Wilkinson about their book, The Wall Between, what Jews and Palestinians don't want to know about each other. We hope you'll join us.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Kandola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.